Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary and I post 2 new videos every single week on Sundays and Thursdays. For today's video, we are going to be discussing Sally Rooney's book and the subsequent Hulu adaptation of Normal People. So, as you can see, I don't have this book. I read it in April, but I rented it from the library as an ebook and an audiobook, and I listened to it on audiobook. I have divided this video into 2 parts. Part 1 is going to be a spoiler-free section where I just give a general overview of the plot, talk about the writing style of the book, and then how good the Hulu adaptation was in my opinion. I'm going to analyze them both separately on how much I liked each one, and then talk about them as a collective unit and as a story as a whole. And then in part 2, there will be spoilers because I'm going to go further into each element of the show that was changed and elements that weren't changed but maybe could have been or should have been tweaked, and how I felt about different things in the show and in the book. I have notes, several pages of notes. I will let you know before the spoiler section starts so that if you haven't read the book and or seen the show, you can go ahead and get out of here. Without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. I have a feeling this is going to be a long video, so go ahead and grab yourself a snack or drink, and let's begin. Okay, Normal People is a book by Sally Rooney. I believe it came out in either 2018 or 2019. I read it in April of 2020, so last month. It is a new adult contemporary romance type thing, and in the book we follow our 2 main characters, Connell and Marianne. Normal People is the second book, I believe, by Sally Rooney. She's an Irish author. Her first book was called Conversation with Friends. I didn't read it. I've heard it's similar in theme to Normal People, but like I said, I only read Normal People, so I can't really speak to that. So in Normal People, we follow 2 Irish new adults, I suppose. So the book basically follows our 2 characters from their final year of secondary school through their final year of college, and it shows them develop over these 4 years, the struggles they go through separately and together, and they have a bit of a romantic bond that they start in secondary school that lasts all the way through. The whole book is kind of one of those will they end up together, won't they end up together type of situations. Our female protagonist is Marianne. She is headstrong, she is unpopular, she is teased by her classmates, and she lives in a large mansion on top of a hill. Then we have Connell, who is shy but well-liked by his classmates. He's from a working-class family, and he meets Marianne or becomes friends with Marianne because his mother is employed as a housekeeper in Marianne's household. Marianne and Connell become friends because Connell picks his mother up from work every day or a few days a week, however often she's there, and he sees Marianne. So in the book, a lot of how you find out about his relationship to Marianne and how he feels about her is through his internal monologue. Connell and Marianne's relationship really begins to develop because Connell picks his mother up from work and talks to Marianne while she gets ready to leave. This friendship that they sort of have is only outside of school, and by no means does he let anyone at school know that he talks to Marianne. And as I'm sure you suspected, Marianne and Connell do end up hooking up. They hook up through the end of their secondary schooling, and then they go off to the same university where their roles kind of reverse. At the private university, Connell feels very out of his shell because he's from a working class family, and he makes 1 or 2 friends with his flatmates that he shares a room with, but then doesn't actually end up blossoming that much. His shyness really comes into play. Marianne, on the other hand, goes to college, makes a ton of new friends, is very popular, and she fits in well because she's from the same social class as everyone else. The book then follows their relationships with other people. Marianne has other boyfriends, Connell has a few flings and another girlfriend, but they always manage to come back together and then break up again. So the whole book is sort of a will they or won't they end up together. The style in which the book is written is that every 6 months or so, they'll have one scene of Marianne and Connell's life told from either of their perspectives, and in that scene, you'll get a snippet of what's happening at the moment, and then it'll back up for the 6 or 8 months or however long it's been since the last time you had a scene from them, and sort of tell that person's side of the story and what has happened to them in the interim. The Hulu show pretty much follows the same formula as the book. There are large jumps in time, there are empty gaps where you don't really know what has happened, and there's a lot of fill-in through conversation. The show did a really good job of showcasing what each person went through on their own, and they told a much more chronological story than the novel did, which was a good choice, I think, because it makes much more sense for a show to work that way than it does for a show to be like, this scene happens and then flashing back all the time. That would have been very confusing, I think, so I think they did a good job. I know that Sally Rooney worked with the show producers and the people who adapted the script from the novel, and there are scenes that are really word for word right out of the book. No flair, no fluff, exactly what happens. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Sally Rooney did work with them on this, and I think a lot of that has to do with the dialogue in the book being almost sparing. Now, the show is divided into 12 episodes that are 30 minutes each. Some are a little less than that. I don't think any are more than that. I think they're all around 20 to 30 minutes. I thought it was a good length. It's very bingeable. I binged it. I watched all of the show in 2 days. Not saying that's something to be proud of. I'm just saying it's something that happened. Overall, the show did a really good job of capturing the book. There are some changes that I'm curious about. There are some characters who were bigger in the book that are smaller in the show, which probably has something to do with the time constraint. Probably has something to do with the fact that they made it 12 episodes really quick. I heard people talking about there being a sequel to the show, which doesn't really make sense. There is not a second book, so I don't know what they would do for a sequel. I've heard people say that instead they're going to make Conversations with Friends the same way. Again, I haven't read that. I know it's different characters, but it's supposed to be like a cousin novel. I'm not entirely sure. Overall, I would say the show does hold up to the book, and it is really well produced. It's a beautiful show. Casting was really well done. Daisy Edgar-Jones does a really good job as Marianne. Paul Pascal, oh my god, I don't know his name. The actor who plays Connell, his last name is Mezcal, I think, or Pascal. Oh my god, this is terrible. What is his name? And the actress who plays Lorraine, Connell's mother, she does a phenomenal job as well. I think my biggest critique of the book and the plot and the story in general is I just want to start off by saying I'm not an Irish person, in case that wasn't very clear by everything about me. I've never been to Ireland. My extent of knowledge of Irish culture comes from Melanie Murphy here on YouTube and Adam from the second season of Love Island UK. So I really don't know if this is an Irish thing. I've heard a lot of people say this is how Irish relationships are. I think to an extent it's how young people relationships are. And by that, I mean the reason Connell and Marianne run into all the problems that they run into is because they refuse to communicate with one another. And they've got a lot of their own individual baggage that they don't really know how to bring together to make a union. The quote that I think best describes this is from a Vulture article I read on the show by Jessica Goldstein that says, "These beautiful, book-smart dum-dums never talk about anything important until at least 10 months after it matters." And that pretty much sums it up. Something to note about both the book and the show is that there's a lot of sex in it. So if you're not into that, probably don't watch the show. I really liked it. I thought it was really well done. It sounds so weird. I really liked the sex. But I thought it was really well done. I thought it was very believable, which is kind of weird to say. Some of the things on the show I have never seen in a movie that is made for regular distribution ever. You see a penis on multiple occasions. Am I allowed to say that word on the internet? But you do. So, if you're not into that, definitely don't watch this with your parents unless you're really cool with your parents. I wouldn't watch this with my parents. I wouldn't even tell my parents I've seen it. They're gonna know I've seen it after this. So if that's something that bothers you, that's something to note. There's a couple of trigger warnings. There are a couple of trigger warnings on the show, but there's a couple other ones for the show in the book. There's suicide, so if something like that will bother you, if hearing about someone's abuse will bother you, that is on here as well. Domestic violence, if that's going to bother you, there's some of that in here, as well as in the book, there is a little bit of triggering material for eating disorders. So if any of that is going to trigger you, then just be wary and go into it knowing the eating disorder stuff is not in the show. So with that, that is going to be the spoiler-free section done. If you haven't read the book, haven't seen the show, and you would like to do either, I would recommend clicking away from the video now. I really am glad you stopped by, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you either have already seen it and want to know what I think, or you just don't really care, get ready for some spoilers. I'm going to give them a second to clear up. All right, I think that's long enough. I think they've left. The biggest changes that I noticed. I'm going to start with the character changes, the character differences, and then move on to plot points. There's not actually that many things that are super different, but there were a couple of things that stood out to me. First one being Marianne's mom. In the book, I guess they're all flashbacks, but there's a lot more of the actual abuse that Marianne suffers from her mother. In the show, you see a lot of her mother watching on while her brother will say mean things to her, or you hear about that kind of thing happening. In the book, her mom does a couple of things that are manipulative and bad. In the book, her mom, I believe, is an alcoholic, or at least it references her drinking a lot. But definitely you don't come away thinking her mom's a good person from watching the show. The other character that I thought was really different in the book and in the show was Peggy. In the book, Peggy's a big character. She's really, really important. She sort of mirrors the relationships that Marianne has with men and shows that she seeks out toxic people and toxic friendships. I think the show did a good job of showing how Joanna and Peggy were very, very different, but you didn't think Peggy was as big of a character, and it sort of seemed like Marianne was friends with Joanna the same way she was friends with Peggy. In the book, she spends way more time with Peggy, I guess, than she does in the show. And Peggy has a way larger influence. Like with Marianne's relationship with Jamie, it's Peggy that makes her stay with him. Not makes her, but manipulates her into believing that all of her friends will be mad at her if she breaks up with him and that she sort of has no choice but to stay with Jamie, which doesn't make any more sense in the book than it does in the show. There's a scene in the Italian villa in the show where Peggy's like, he's an asshole, but he adores you. Does he? I don't know. I understand that Jamie was supposed to be like the toxic man in Marianne's life and how like she always seeks out an abusive partner because she has no self-worth and yada, yada, yada. But I just feel like, to me, it wasn't believable that she would stay with him, which maybe just shows that I'm privileged enough to not know a domestic violence relationship like that. Because I do understand that it's really, really hard for people to leave toxic situations sometimes, and that it can be really, really difficult when you're raised in such a toxic way to like expel that toxicity from your life. But for me, from a fiction standpoint, I felt like if Jamie was going to be the like other love interest in this love triangle, he should have been at least a little likable or have a few redeeming qualities. Because her first boyfriend, whose name I can't remember now, was a pretty good guy, but he just had some like rough spots, like playing devil's advocate all the time and stuff like that. And obviously a lot of privilege from growing up the way that he did. I just feel like there was nothing good about Jamie. Really ever. He was controlling before he started dating Marianne. And then he was more controlling afterwards. I don't know. You'll have to let me know down below if I just sound like an idiot. Or if I just, because I don't get it. Connell, I would say, has a few things that are different about him in the book and the show, but I think they make sense. In the book, a lot of his internal monologue discusses being politically a communist and a Marxist and having a lot of communist and Marxist and socialist economic ideas, which he doesn't go into any detail on really in the show. There's that one scene in Italy where he tells Marianne that he realizes that money is really what makes the world go round, and she sort of examines her own privilege and talks about how she doesn't ever really think about money, which again shows her privilege. And I have seen people complaining about how that's the only time that it comes up and that's the only time that they talk about the fact that they met because Connell's mother worked for Marianne's family. But that's the same in the book. They don't ever discuss it at another point. They talk about it there, and I believe that scene is told from Marianne's point of view. I don't remember, but there's some sort of discussion about, in the internal monologue, about the fact that Marianne's mother paid Connell's mother, and then Connell spent that money on Marianne when they were dating. And that wasn't included in the show, which makes sense. A lot of things that people talked about inside weren't included, but even more, I felt, were. They added scenes to the show, which I really liked, because I thought it helped. I was curious how they were going to show, for example, all of the school scenes with Marianne, how they were going to show people bullying her, or I guess how they were going to address the fact that people had bullied her, how they were going to address the fact that there was that rumor about her that she took her shirt off and dried it in the girls' bathroom. But they showed all of those things instead of just talking about them, which is how they addressed it in the book, which again, I liked. And that sort of brings me to the Biggest changes in plot, or the biggest deviation in the plot from the show to the book, from the book to the show. Whatever. So first, I'm trying to do these in chronological order. There were way more scenes in school, like secondary school, in the show than there were in the book, which I really enjoyed because I felt like you got to see their characters develop, you got to see why they sort of acted the way that they did, and you got to actually see scenes play out that in the book they only mentioned and brushed over. And again, I think it makes sense to do it that way because of the difference in medium from book to show. In the book, obviously, you can read about somebody's thoughts on how an event went down. In a show, you sort of have to see the event, unless you're just going to have someone narrate it, which some shows do, but I don't prefer it, so I'm glad they took this route. One of the other plot points that I think was interesting, that it was left in almost, and I know I would have talked about this as something that had been left out if they took it out entirely, but Miss Neary. If you don't know, if you watched the show and didn't read the book, Miss Neary was Connell's teacher in secondary school. And then the summer after he and Marianne break up in college, he's back home at a club, sees her, they make out, and then he's like, I'm gonna throw up, and he leaves. In the book, that's like a huge scene, and he tells Marianne about it later. In the movie, they like flash it real quick. If you didn't know who Miss Neary was, you would think he was just hooking up with some random middle-aged woman, because they don't really address her that much at the beginning either. I think there's one scene in like the first or second episode where Marianne's like, what are we talking to Miss Neary about? Why was she laughing so much? And he's like, I don't fancy her. Everyone thinks I fancy her. And blah, 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 blah. But there's not like this real thing about how that's like a repetitive thing that happens. So I don't know if people who just watch the show were looking out for that or not. I just thought that was interesting. I thought it was weird to bring it back in and then never have him have the conversation about it with Marianne. Because when he talks about it with Marianne, he brings it up like it's a traumatic thing that happened. Because it kind of is. They downplayed it in the show a lot, which I just thought it was interesting that they put it in at all if they were going to make it like that small of a thing, I guess. You'll have to let me know down below what you think about that. Then there was the summer in Italy. There was a character missing, at least one. Connell and Niall were supposed to have been traveling Europe with Niall's girlfriend. It doesn't really matter that she wasn't there. She doesn't really bring a lot to the table, except for that Marianne talks about how she made repeated attempts to make her feel welcome and included and everything, and Peggy sort of made it that harder. The other thing, and I don't know if I just didn't realize in the book that it was weird, or if there were other people actually, I feel like there were other people actually staying at the villa. In the show, there's only Peggy, Jamie, and Marianne. In Marianne's like summer home in Italy, which felt weird. It didn't feel as weird once Niall and Connell got there, but you know that Niall and Connell are only staying there for like a day or two, and so it's weird. I don't know. I felt like it was weird that, I don't know. If I were Peggy, I don't think I would want to spend the summer with my best friend and her asshole boyfriend. I just don't think I would. But maybe I don't understand the dynamic well enough. I don't know. I thought that was really odd. Again, it didn't seem as weird once the boys showed up, but just knowing that that's how it was for a whole summer, that just doesn't seem, especially since Jamie and Marianne were fighting the whole time. I just don't understand why they would all be there together. That didn't make any sense to me. But again, maybe they just only brought those characters to Italy because I think they actually, I don't know this for a fact, but it doesn't look like it's filmed in Ireland. So I think they actually did go to Italy to film that, so maybe it was just cheaper to only have the characters that actually needed to be there and mattered. I don't know. It just felt weird to me. Also, a plot thing that didn't really happen that I noticed, maybe it was, I mean, it kind of did, but I think it goes back to Peggy not being a very important character in the show. In the book, Marianne and Jamie break up, and Peggy makes a huge deal out of it, and basically none of Marianne's friends will talk to her. Which, they hint that that happens in the show too, but also in the show, they act like it happened because she went to Sweden, and not because she broke up with Jamie. Speaking of Sweden, Marianne and Lucas's relationship in Sweden is a lot different in the show than it is in the book. Or at least in a different order. In the show, it shows Marianne telling Lucas, like, look, I just want this to be a BDSM thing. I don't want this to have any feelings. I want to feel useless, blah, 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 blah. Full disclosure, I'm not in the BDSM community. I don't really know a whole lot about that, besides things that I've read online about people saying that this is bad representation of it. So if you were hoping I would have a big deep dive into her BDSM explorations, I don't really know much about it. Her sex life is not healthy. That's all I really know about it. I'm not saying the BDSM is not healthy. I'm just saying that the way she's looking to be hurt by people isn't healthy. It isn't healthy. In the book, the reason Marianne and Lucas break up is because during one of their BDSM sessions, Lucas says he loves her, and then she gets up and leaves. In the movie, Lucas is taking naked pictures of her, and she's uncomfortable with the way he's tying her up, I think. I'm not entirely sure what even really happens. But she gets up and slowly leaves. In the book, she has like a blow up about it. So that was different. And I think, to be honest, the show kind of does Lucas dirty, because in the book, he's like trying to be her boyfriend and be a good guy, it seems like. And in the show, they just kind of have him being like a dickhead, frankly. Another thing that happens in the book that doesn't happen in the show, while Marianne is in Sweden, the book talks a fair bit about the fact that she's getting really skinny and she's not eating. So whether she's developing an eating disorder or what, I didn't notice that she looked any skinnier in the show, which I didn't really expect to, because I didn't think that they would make the actress gain and lose weight for a role. Maybe she did. There were definitely scenes like the funeral where Marianne seemed frailer, I guess. But overall, I wouldn't say that she seemed like she had an eating disorder, and they didn't mention it at all. No one mentioned her being skinnier. I think they just sort of left it, which I was fine with, but I did just think that was something to note. Also, in the book, there's a thing about Marianne's naked pictures being online. It's like briefly mentioned, I think by Peggy at that party. I think at the Christmas party with Niall and Connell, she goes up to Connell at the bar, and Peggy says something about Marianne's pictures being online. I know that scene was in the show, but I didn't catch what she said. And since I sort of knew already, I didn't really go back and watch, which perhaps in retrospect I should have, but I just wanted to finish it. So I'm not sure if those pictures were online. I don't even know if that was a real thing that happened in the book or if it was just something that Peggy was saying to be an asshole. And then perhaps the biggest change of them all, the ending. They changed the ending of the show. In the book, Connell and Marianne have one conversation about Connell going to grad school in New York. The book ends with them having talked about it and Connell saying, I'm going to grad school in New York. Or I got into grad school in New York. And Marianne saying, you should go. And in the show, you see them take time to process it. You see Connell saying, I got into grad school in New York, and Marianne saying, oh my God, that's great. And Connell saying, I don't think I'll go, and Marianne saying, let's think about it. And then in the final episode, the final scene of the final episode, they're sort of discussing the fact that they're not together anymore. They're going to break up. They're going to move away from each other. They don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so in a way it is open-ended, because maybe Connell does go to New York for 1 year and then comes back and is with Marianne forever, happily ever after. But maybe he's not. Maybe he stays in New York. Maybe you don't know what's going to happen. Which is the same as in the book, but in the book there's no definitive breakup. I think in the book everyone realizes that that's what could happen, but nobody knows that that's what's definitely happened. So the show definitely does a better job of tying it all up in a neat little bow and wrapping it up for you. And that's the last thing I had notes on. That is going to be it from me today. Let me know down below what you thought of the book, what you thought of the show, what you thought of the show as an adaptation or the show just as a show. But that is going to be it from me today, guys. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button if you would like to see more videos like this from me. Again, I post every Sunday and Thursday. Hope you guys had a great weekend. I hope you're having a great week. And I will see you on Thursday. Bye!